Yes. Thank you so much for agreeing to have a chat. I watched the film yesterday, and it's, just what an incredible woman, Margaret Moth was. This is your first, sort of foray into directing. How did you find the experience, and what was it about Margaret's story that made this the right fit for you?
I don't know why I was so compelled to throw my hat in the ring for this project, but I was just possessed by this absolute passion, this terror that somebody else would get it before me and do a rotten job. I don't know why it seems so personal, um, but it all worked out, just I played a warrior princess on TV. She was a warrior princess in real life, and a punk rock princess. She was all the princesses um, thrown into one. She was just a weirdly inspirational woman.
And as somebody who was sort of raised on Susie and the Banshees, she definitely has, like you're saying, that sort of like punk rock
Yes.
look to her,
Yeah.
which I think, despite not necessarily knowing much about her before watching the documentary, it was kind of something that sort of connected me to her. So I guess, and I think sort of like through listening to the interviews with people, that was something that was very sort of universal about her, was that she just knew how to connect with people, not just through a camera, but in person too.
Yes, though she picked and chose. She was very she didn't cotton to people who abused their authority. And in those days, that usually meant men. And she had a real problem with that from it was age old with her father, whom she despised. He's a bit of a brute, but that kind of threw me off the scent for a long time because I thought the father was the problem, but all her siblings said the mother was the problem. So she had just two very unloving parents, uh, despite the fact that Margaret took care of her mother to the bitter end. Preferred her mother tremendously, but all the other kids were like, no, mum was a monster. So it took me ages to figure that out.
Mm. And can you remember what when your first experience of hearing about Margaret was? I mean, obviously she's a fellow New Zealander. When was that first sort of time that you heard about her on the news?
The only thing I knew about her when I first was approached to make this film was my mind immediately Rolodex back like all the way back to 1992 when New Zealand was riveted to this news report about one of our own war camera person who had been sniped in Sarajevo during the siege in 1992. So I guess that report must have made an incredible impression on me because I somehow knew who she was, the image of her, the strident, um, forceful being that she was, must have found perch in my brain because I knew everything I needed to in order to throw down for this project. And I talked to her best friend and her lover, Jeff, and they all picked me back. So that was great because I needed them on side to make the film. Because I must say, I'm not that concerned with what we call objective truth. It's like this is not a piece of journalism. I'm not a journalist. That doesn't even really interest me. I'm interested in the subjective accounts of who Margaret is, and sometimes they don't mesh that well, and that gives the audience these loopholes to fill with their own impressions because they'll be going, hang on, A plus B does not lead to C. There, something's wrong here, and they fill it with their own impressions. So that the film is really kind of a collaboration with the audience, just like all art is. It really belongs to the viewer. And yeah, I'm really proud of that. I'm proud that I didn't tell people how to think, what to think, or how to feel about any part of her personality or her life choices or even the conflicts she was part of, because that privilege belongs to the viewer.
I love how you have, interviews with a couple of her past partners, and they both seem to be talking about different women. There's like one point where one of them's saying, "Oh yeah, she was with him, but it wasn't anything," and then you're talking to that person, and they're like, I was her everything. She wanted me here, she wanted me to do this. And it's really interesting to see. And I
Yeah,
guess it's kind of the way that, we all remember things and
yeah.
people and our interactions differently as time goes on.
That's right. And I love that the audience gets to choose who they think is the most reliable witness. So, do you believe Yashinka or do you believe Jeff? Do you believe none of them and only believe the journalist with the blue shirt, Steph? Um, that's the fun of it, and that's why the film is different things to different people.
How did the nature with talking to previous partners and people who were around when her accident happened, how do you then approach doing these interviews, because obviously you're dealing with a lot of intimate and sensitive material.
You have to develop a relationship. There's a lot of stewardship that goes on of people. You're expecting them to give up the goods. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. And you just have to chalk that up to, experience, or go, wow, I didn't find a way to get that person to unlock, but I was very, very blessed with Jeff and Yashenka. And I must tell you that some people, they kind of, they, not all of them agree nor like what other people said. There's a lot of disagreement amongst these people about what the truth was. But I love it all. I like the tension in it. That's because the audience is privileged is to make up their mind who is worth believing.
I think it's fascinating as well that this film is sort of being released almost in the wake of Alex Garland's Civil War, which is obviously a fictionalized film, but it's dealing with war journalists and photographers. Are you kind of hoping that maybe some people that have had their interest sort of piqued by what they've seen in that film might now then seek to find out more about, the real life people like Margaret?
Yes, I really hope so. And to engender a new respect for the cost of news gathering, because these people are facing, imminent danger as you and I are speaking. And there's no self-interest in them being there. They are there they're very committed to telling the story of the kids and the victims of war who, through no fault of their own, are facing annihilation. So when they hear that a conflict is kicking off, these people are on tenterhooks. Like the day I talked to Christiane Amanpour, this was the first day of the invasion into Ukraine. And she and Joe and the other journalists were just fritzing out because from the stress of needing to either be there or service their colleagues who are there. They're on red alert. It was very generous of her to give me 40 minutes of her time, and every word she said was gold. But I think they're trauma bonded to the job and to what they believe is their essential role in speaking for the powerless.
She's an incredible woman, and it's a really fascinating documentary because it's not this is who she was. It is this is how everybody saw her. She's somewhere hidden within there. You guys make up your mind.
Yeah, I mean, she's a very mysterious character. I've never ever met anybody like her. It took me a really long time to get to click onto the fun, the probable hole at the center of your heart. And you want to reach for things with someone like Margaret, like sexual abuse, that would, and in a way that would be too easy, though horrifying. It's a too easy a thing to reach for. And it wasn't that. Nobody could testify to that. She never said it to Joe. She never said it to the others. So it was really just a dearth of love that gave her zero capacity for pity, self-pity. And that became her superpower. That was what enabled her to come back from a massive maiming at the hands of a sniper.
Yeah, she's an incredible woman. And I guess, sort of an incredible woman in your life. We have to talk briefly about the phenomena that was Xena. This was a show looking back, that was so ahead of the curve in terms of, its LGBTQ representation, strong female characters. And it's even one of the first that tackled what's now the standard musical episode. How does it feel to have been part
Yeah.
of what was such a pioneering show?
It's great. I think we're also well ahead of the curve in terms of diversity and casting. She had an African American boyfriend played by Bobby Hosea, and not just one. I think Tony Todd. Like we cast. My husband comes from Detroit, and he knew that everybody wants to see themselves on screen, wants to see themselves represented. So he knew that African American people needed to see themselves. Asian people, we cast them not necessarily in strictly Asian roles. So yeah, we were doing that because it was fun, not because anyone told us to. It was part of the ethos of the show to have everybody in there.
And going back to Never Look Away, this is obviously it's just screened in the UK at Sundance London. It'll obviously be released later on in the year. Why do you hope that people take the time to watch this film?
Margaret is weirdly inspiring because even though she was a bad girl, she managed to fight back from unbelievable trauma to live a life of worth. And for example, she never wanted to have kids herself, so she had her tubes tied and she had to go to court as a young woman to make that happen because it wasn't legally an option in New Zealand. And through incredible trauma, through the sniping, she found her children, and they were the children of war. And she lived in service of that. So, yeah, she was a bad girl who learned to live on the side of the angels. And what's important about that is if she did so much, when so much had been ripped away from her, who am I not to reach that little bit higher for the thing that I desire to reach my potential? So that's the lesson of Margaret, and that's the change that she's wrought in my life.
Well, thank you so much for your time and best of luck with the release of the film.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye,
And thank you.
Pussycat.
Yeah, thanks for not being
Pussycat.
phased by this one. Normally she turns up at the start so people are aware that she's here, but today she's obviously running behind, so she just
She's sitting on
found
your
in the middle.
keyboard.
Yeah, yes, you always do this, don't you, Ratchet? But
Yeah.
yes, it's been lovely to talk, and like I said, I think the films, it's so powerful, so incredible, and I just like that I think in a strange way, she's very. If she was a man, a lot of the things that she was doing, like deciding not to have children, and it wouldn't have been, I guess nobody would have really looked twice. But I think it's the fact that she is she was this woman that was, I'm going to have multiple partners, I'm not going to have kids. That was seen as a quite risque back in the 80s.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. She had to fight hard to be who she was.